This video will cover a simple way to make your own miniature frames using recycled materials at a very low cost. I typically find pictures I want to use either by printing them off of the internet or clipping them from magazines. For the frames themselves, I use thin recycled cardboard from things like tissue boxes or food packaging like cereal boxes. First, I glue the picture down on the cardboard with Mod Podge. I also cover the top with a layer just to seal it. There are two framing techniques I'm going to cover here. One that uses only cardboard to make a simple rectangular frame, and one that makes a more ornate style of frame. For this first, simpler style, I've already glued my picture to the Kleenex box and cut it to size. Next, I'll cut pieces of cardboard into 1/4-inch strips. I'll also cut strips into 1/8 and 1/16 widths as well. It's time to start cutting the strips to size in order to fit around the picture. The one end is cut at a 45-degree angle to mimic the mitered edges of a real picture frame. I've gotten used to typically eyeballing the length of the frame around the picture and mark it before cutting, but you can always measure with a ruler if you really want to be precise. I find that using the strips I've already cut to get the correct angle of the ends of the adjoining strips really helps, but if you don't cut them exactly, there are ways to fudge and cover up the gaps. You'll see this in the second example I make. Instead of gluing everything straight onto the picture, I like to glue it together first so that it's easier to paint. On the back of the strips, I usually connect them with a little triangle of cardboard or cardstock that holds them in place. It often helps to use 1, 2, 3 blocks to ensure that everything dries flat. Once that's dried, I can start gluing on the 1/8 and 1/16 strips I cut to build up the layers to give the frame depth. While my first example is drying, I'll move on to the second frame. As you can see, this one isn't perfectly aligned, but we'll fix that. I'll add some strips of cardboard around the inside of the frame before adding the rest of the details. I also trim the outside edges so that everything is flush. Now I can add some decorative designs using some puff paint or fabric paint. For anyone who grew up in the 90s like I did, I bet you can remember using this paint on those sweatshirts our moms made with all those iron-on designs. This paint that I have is old, but you can still find them in craft stores like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. The key to making frames like this look as realistic as possible is symmetry. Whatever you do on one side, you should mimic on the opposite side. Also, although the paint color doesn't matter too much, I do like to try to match the puff paint color as closely as I can to what I'm going to use on the top coat, just in case the top coat of paint doesn't fully cover everything. That way, if the puff paint peeks through a little, it won't ruin the final look of the piece. When everything is dried, I like to paint the frames with a coat of Black Magic base coat, a recipe created by Jeremy of Black Magic Craft. I'll link his video in the description box. The Mod Podge seals everything while the black paint helps give the piece a base color that allows the metallic paint on top to pop. Often metallic paint is rather thin and takes several coats to cover everything, unless you put a dark coat of paint underneath it first. And of course, don't forget to paint the edges both inside and outside of the frame. With the decorative design, it's important to get into all the little nooks and crannies without adding so much paint that you lose the details. Again, the puff paint might peek through the layers just a bit, so just keep that in mind when using it. After everything is finally dried, it's time to put on the top coat of metallic paint. I used a more antique gold on the simple frame and a brighter gold on the decorative frame. want a more aged look for your frame after the top layer is dry, you can always go back and add a little bit of watered down black paint to brush over it to get into those crevices. Now it's finally time to glue the frames onto the pictures. Again, I like to use 1, 2, 3 blocks to ensure that everything dries as flat as possible. And here are the final pieces. Really get creative when making these frames. I've used cording, like on this frame right here in the top right, and I've added beads around the inside of this one. The edges of the frames don't all have to be rectangular. You can cut more complicated edges on some to make them more interesting. And I've even used some scraps from my leftover Cricut projects to create interesting patterns, like this one on the left. I've even used the corrugated insides of a piece of thicker cardboard to create frames with more depth. Is to experiment and play with everything to get some cool results. And the best part is, even if you mess up, you won't have wasted a ton of money on materials. Happy crafting!